So, hello everyone, I'm Shane Caraveo. I work with Mozilla out of Vancouver, BC. I'm feeling a little like this right now because I used Google Maps to get here and it sent me way up the other side of Dyke Road. So I'm like, kind of in thinking about what we wanted to talk about here, so when I heard about this meeting, I was like, oh, cool, like a whole group of designers getting together to talk about something that I kind of work on, so I wanted to be here, but didn't really know kind of what aspect we would talk about. So in discussing this with Brian, Brian came up with the idea of a use case of payments through kind of an intense API. So I'm hoping I'll be able to drag him up here because he'll be more eloquent in describing it than I am. But I also kind of wanted to show you the kind of iterations that we've gone through with the share feature over the past kind of year and a half or so. About a year and a half ago, when we were with an organization called Mozilla Messaging, which was in charge of Thunderbird and messaging and was a separate organization from Mozilla for a while, we started a project called F1. And the whole idea of F1 was, let's make sharing really super easy in the browser. And at the same time, it was an attempt to kind of look at how can we start thinking about getting rid of the NASCAR icons that are on all the web pages and kind of reduce that down. This is the initial version of F1 that we came up with, and there you go. And I'm just gonna move that aside. So this was an iteration that we kind of went through and we got to after some point of doing some user testing around this, getting feedback from users on kind of how to get an UI together. It was limited to a small set of services that we had chosen as being kind of primary providers in North America. And all of the UI was our own. We controlled it. We used OAuth in the back end to be able to drive this. There's a lot of work, a lot of effort behind that. But people actually really liked it. And now that we're actually starting to shut down the oldest version of the service, we're starting to get complaints because people are like, but we really like that. But there are a number of issues with it, which is why we went and changed. We went through a second iteration, kind of doing very similar techniques, but this is moving away from a server implementation into a fully client-side implementation. And it's very dark on here. It's the kind of OS X theme panel that's in Firefox. But this, kind of much in the same way, we wanted to control the look and feel of what was happening in there. We wanted to see how that could integrate into the look and feel of Firefox itself. And it works, but it's still a lot of effort on our part.
I can jump in to help explain a little bit maybe. On the original one that he showed there, right, everything was coming from a server that we were running. So all your shares, when you hit share, it would bounce to our server and then bounce to Facebook. So as Mozilla, we found this a little difficult because we're very much trying to prevent servers from intercepting whatever you're doing. And for us, that was kind of a privacy security concern that we wanted to see that we could kind of work around. And that's where the OAuth kind of came in. And you would authorize Mozilla to act on your behalf against Twitter. All your shares would bounce our server and then hit Twitter directly. Then this second version that he's showing now actually removes that server component. So all of a sudden, all the OAuth is done from your browser directly to Twitter. So there's no actual bouncing anymore. And it's still, we're completely controlling the UI in here. So we have to build the UI as part of Mozilla to whatever Twitter's API is, and then constantly update that in order to push the shares.
So you're limited to those three because like it just is extra time to develop against every API.
Exactly, we have to continue to develop the new ones. We started to build a generic one that any application could kind of interface a bookmarking push, and that way they could offer, we accept bookmarks, and they would get some kind of generic piece. But you know, for instance, email on Gmail is a slightly different interface. Facebook, slightly different interface. We found for each of these that we implemented, they all had slightly different tweaks, which made it really hard to actually either just pass them a URL. Some of them wanted a URL plus a title, plus metadata, images about the page, things like that. They all really complicated the thing, so we kept it limited to a set that we could kind of control.
And and this actual, what I'm running on my laptop right now with this isn't extensible, but we actually had the code for this to be extensible through apps that you would install. So if an app actually installed a handler for a share activity, it could show up in this list as well. I think one of the problems that we kind of run into with this is that the providers, the service providers, really want to control their own interfaces. They want to have their own UI in there. And so right now we're working on an iteration which is using, it's based completely on the Web Activities API right now, which is very close to the Web Intents API. There's a few small differences. And that will be basically a similar panel, picker panel, but with the UI coming from the vendors themselves. And I actually was trying to get it running just before I came up here, and there's something wrong. This is my travel laptop, so I wasn't quite prepared with having that running. But I can probably get it running in the next hour or so and be able to show people that iteration. So yeah, this is kind of the steps that we've gone through. Kind of the comments that we're hearing from the users that started out with the F1 is that they don't like this UI as much as they like the F1 UI. They feel like it's less capable and it's not as nice. And I think that same set of users is probably going to even less like the stuff that we're doing now, because it's going to be quite different. But it's hard to tell because it's a very small user base.
And one of the things that we offered in the original F1 prototype was speed. That was essentially our kind of pitch, is that sharing can be slow, right? The copy-paste system that people use right now to share, you go to URL bar, edit, copy, open a new tab, find the service you want, then use their sharing interface. Our pitch for this design was essentially that we could launch and share everything much faster than you normally would. And that's something that we're now having a problem with imagine this panel, but it's just loading an iframe of the Twitter web intent. That now has a load time. And then like Gmail, as much as I love Gmail, the load time on the Gmail Compose UI is terrible. Like that speed difference we find slows people down and they actually stop sharing. Right? We get a lot of hits of hit share, click on like some service that might take a long time, and then the share doesn't go anywhere. And a lot of that we assume is actual speed. We think if you can get preloaded UIs, things are pretty much all offline, or whatever tricks we can do in order to make those things fast, that's going to be necessary, because that's part of the sharing feature that we were offering and really hit home with most people.
I think there's a cognitive load as well sometimes, like, especially with things like Delicious. So you hit the little bookmarklet, and it takes quite a while to load the interface anyway. And then when it does, it asks you to come up with some tags that are appropriate for the thing. You think what tags you've used before or what might be the best. And it all kind of takes time. You just really want to sort of like click it and not even do anything else, and it's just done. Yeah. So there's some challenges with getting that really cognitively fast as well.
There was a really strong convention about just copying URLs into emails into IM conversations, and it's really
and trust it.
10x.
People trust it.
People using our sharing tools, 10x copy and paste URLs, and we track that for publishers as well. It's huge.
Yeah, and as a design exercise, right, like this is still just a tool, right? Like the end goal that and designs that we tried to work out was that, like, I'm trying to share a link with my partner. It's an activity I do all the time. 90 times a day I find a link, I send my partner, but this thing actually makes me hit share, choose Gmail, type Karen in the to, and then like hit send, right? Like why are we presenting tools instead of solutions to people?
Yeah, I've got one overarching question in my head. It's like, do we even need this at all? you know, with how long's the browser going to last? How long's URL share? You know, my Android phone does all this stuff all by itself. When I live in my Android phone or my Android device or any other of those, it's going to do it anyway. You know, it's hanging over my head. Why are we talking about this? We're just inventing stuff because we can.
Well, shut up.
I know. I have a cold, I'm sorry. But you know what I mean? It's like, we can, but do we need to?
So the intent system on Android is really nice because it does work for you with what you're using, but we don't really have that on the web. And so yeah, I think you're always going to have multiple devices, and even though you may be on your small device most of the time, I think larger format devices are always going to be necessary.
There's always going to be an agent. There's always going to be a user agent, even if it's not what we recognise as a browser today. So
yeah, and I think that things like intents, it's the beginning of kind of like starting to break down kind of this content versus Chrome separation, and so we can start to see the browser potentially dissolve into that's just the OS or something,
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and so we're still going to need these types of APIs. For me personally, the problem that I have with the way that stuff is today is you go to a page and you are presented with your choice of what you can share with. And for me, I want to have my own choice of what that is.
And you don't want to make that choice every time the page loads.
Exactly.
You want to just say share, and then
it's like my agent knows what I do. Like it knows that I go to Twitter or to Facebook. I shouldn't have to have the pages guess for me what that is.
It was a devil's advocate point, but for
sure.
me, it's the point. As a user experience designer, is why would a user want to do this in the first place? What's the benefit for them? And then once we know if we can find that benefit, then we can start to hang everything off that benefit. But so that's from your experience, because you've done quite a lot of research. This is why I'm interested in. What do people love about it? Do they love about it because they can fiddle it? Do they love about it because it's in their browser and not on the web page? You know, what is the thing that the users love about doing it this way that they don't necessarily get the same benefit from, you know, some publisher presented tool?
I think I know Mozilla used to use a term which I don't know whether they use anymore, but the browser is information broker. Like, so it being able to, it knows what your preferences are in terms of how you want to deal with content, and you know that. Yeah. So it's that whole kind of idea of, you know, it's your trusty assistant helping you to do things as opposed to just being let out on the wild web and these are some options presented to you just by chance or by dictation from publishers.
Yeah.
So
I think the motivation behind your question is really interesting. Like, why do people share? That would be quite nice to just like maybe after this just to sort of talk a bit, just to make a list of why people share. You know, it's you know, show off about what you know, or say something for later reference. And there's like a really wide range of motivations behind it, and it would I hadn't really thought about it at all on that level, but that's worth doing.
Yeah.
Sorry to have just talked and then say that there's no time for any more questions. But, we're a little bit over, so we need to push on. Let's
Right.
just.
Can we talk about the payment scenario? I really want to hear your thoughts.
Do you want to give like a 30-second spiel on the payment use case?
Sure, yeah. The only two things I want to bring up was payments. So I'm the head of design for Mozilla Services. So I handle apps and identity projects that we do. And with web apps, one of the intents we're trying to kind of work out is payments, right? So if you're inside an application that like a music store application or something like that, and it wants you to purchase a song, one of the pain points of websites right now is providing your own payment processing services. So if we can bring that into some kind of intent-based system, because users often have a PayPal account or some other payment processor that they've used previously, we're working on some technology where we can create user-based receipts that are basically tied to you or your email address and things like that. That's we could talk about more later. But essentially, is how does that affect the web intents scenario, right? Like the inline view for an intent that was showed previously, that doesn't give any kind of security context. Like if you bounce people out to a different tab, then you have kind of the generic browser thing where security is all related to whatever URL you're looking at. But that isn't a really great experience, I find, for users, because you get thrown around from whatever page you're looking at. You know, if I'm trying to buy the latest Coldplay album, I want to stay on that page, click purchase, have something come down, ask me, you know, PayPal, credit card that's maybe saved in the browser or something else, and then how do you ensure that people feel like that was a secure transaction, whatever process they're going through in that moment. So we're trying to deal with this issue, and we're not really sure what to do there, because at least right now, so much of security in the browser is dealt with through the URL bar, like little icons or colors or, you know, whatever tweaks we can come up with to make you think that it's secure. That's what we do right now, and that's not.
You think it's
Yeah, but that's really is what it is, right? Like EV1 is like it's a green bar now or something, right? And that's definitely secure. So that's the kind of problem we're coming up with. And the only other thing was, and I think this was brought up in Add This, there's a balance that we found in the F1 project with partners that, like, content publishers, they do want some return of, like, was this shared or wasn't this? Research that we did and that we also worked with Facebook a lot on was about the tools that Facebook provides, the, like, your friends have shared this, or your friends haven't shared this. Those tools really help people to actually share. Like a design we did was no one on your Twitter stream has shared this link yet. Like, what would that do to, like, change the face of, like, that share button? Would it make, like, would that game people to, well, not game people in a bad way, but, like, would that, you know, create a gaming interface where they do want to share more? So those are the two things.
With exclamation mark.
Yeah.
Cool.
Be first.
Okay. Cheers, Steve.